The Philadelphia 76ers and their fan base are probably the most disappointed people on earth next to Sophie Rain's father this year, and that is because of their just horrendous season they are currently having. They're currently finding out what Murphy's Law really means, okay? Whatever can go wrong will go wrong, and that is exactly what the 76ers are experiencing this season, as they're probably having a top three curse season. I would say the Pelicans, the 76ers, and the Dallas Mavericks are probably having the three worst seasons luck wise any team has had. And I would say the 76ers are having the second worst because I would say Dallas is having the worst. But 76ers are definitely probably the second most unlucky team this year. And it's just overall, things are going bad. Things aren't going the way you expected. Shit's hitting the fan. It's definitely not a great time. And it's very disappointing for them because they had huge expectations coming into this season. They thought they were going to have a big three of a former MVP candidate, Joel Embiid, a all-star in Tyrese Maxey, and a supposedly superstar in Paul George. Plus, they made tons of veteran signings throughout the offseason. They looked like they were going to have a very good roster and even make a potential finals push going into it as well. In all their moves accumulated, and there was a very high expectations for this team coming into the season. But like I said, shit hit the fan. So in this video, I want to go over the moves that really got those high expectations up there, what happened with those moves, all that, what the expectations were going into the season, and then in reality, what ended up happening. So if that does sound interesting, please watch the video all the way through. Hit the like button, subscribe button, that's a word to me. And without further ado, let's get right into this video. The first thing we're going to be getting into is going to be all their preseason moves that they made to build the roster they currently have. The first thing they did was they signed Paul George to a 4-year, $212 million contract, where at the time, people were saying that he stole him from the Clippers, and even Paul George on his podcast said he felt disrespected by the Clippers offer. In hindsight, I would say the Clippers made the correct move, and it probably wasn't even a disrespectful offer because the way he's playing, it was probably still way too expensive. But they did sign Paul George, and that was one of the biggest splashes of the offseason. They also followed that up by a whole bunch of other signings, like they signed Caleb Martin for a 4-year, $32 million deal. They signed Andre Drummond as their backup center for a 2-year, $10 million deal, Eric Gordon for 2 years, $6.7 million, and Reggie Jackson for 1 year, $3 million. And then even on top of that, they went out and re-signed guys. One guy in Tyrese Maxey, giving him a gigantic extension of 5 years, $204 million. They re-signed Kyle Lowry to a 1 year, $3.3 million deal, and they re-signed Kelly Oubre Jr. for a 2 year, $16.3 million deal. So they went out, they got a whole bunch of veterans fill out their roster. They re-signed a whole bunch of pretty big pieces to their core team the year before, and they made a huge splash in free agency, bringing in a supposedly superstar in Paul George, and overall they made a lot of solid moves. And then even a few more additions they made. They drafted Jarrett McCain, they drafted Justin Edwards, and they signed an undrafted free agency in Adam Bonus. So really, they had a pretty damn good offseason if you just look at it on paper. Like, you would think this is probably going to be a pretty good season because they signed very high level veterans, they had a good draft class, even their undrafted free agents pretty good, and like I said, they added a potential superstar to be a duo for another potential superstar and a budding all-star in Tyrese Maxey. So overall, this offseason gave the 76ers front office a ton of confidence, and it was very obvious by these moves that they were fully committed on winning right now. Like, they wanted to win the season, the finals this year. And I mean, you can't really judge them because literally the year before they had a 47-35 record. They were a playoff team, so they probably figured, hell, if we give Embiid another superstar teammate, we form our big three, fill them out with very high level veterans, have a good draft, we should be an even better team and maybe even be able to make a finals push. And due to all these signings and moves they made in free agency in the offseason before the season, that caused a lot of different things to happen. One of those being the high expectations, which is going to be the very next part of this video. Their preseason expectations for this roster were also through the roof, not just by the fan base, but by the media as a whole, as they were projected to have 50 plus wins on their betting odds, and that was the 8th highest in the entire NBA, on top of the fact that they had the 4th best odds to win the NBA Finals, and they were projected by ESPN to have the 5th best record in the entire NBA going into the season. And like I said, in the gambling markets and the fan base to ESPN to the media, everything had very high expectations for this team. And safe to say, anybody who bet on the Philadelphia 76ers to win the finals is not going to be seeing that money back ever, and it is gone and it has disappeared and vaporized into the ether. You can give up on that bet immediately, and if you had a parlay on it, shit out of luck, okay? That's not hitting. But unfortunately, things did not go to plan, and well, things didn't go, let's just say, as expected. So now, for the next part, let's get into what actually happened this season. So just to give a little overcap of how the season is going so far, they currently, as of recording this video, they have a record of 22-41, which is good for the 11th seed in the Eastern Conference, as they currently have an offensive rating of 23rd in the entire NBA and a defensive rating that ranks at
What did he
26th
say?
in the entire NBA. So definitely not ideal. And I know what you're saying. You're probably thinking, well, they're the 11th seed. Is there a chance they can make the play-in game and maybe even the playoffs, and then Embiid becomes healthy somehow by a miracle of God, and they make the playoffs and they make a finals run? Let's just say that's not very likely, as they currently sit 3.5 games behind both the Chicago Bulls and the Miami Heat for the 10th and ninth spots, which they would need to make the play-in. And then even on top of that, they would have to beat probably the Heat, Orlando, the Hawks, or maybe even the Pistons, possibly. They would have to beat a pretty decent team twice in order to make the playoffs, most likely. And that's probably not going to happen. And then if some by miracle of God they make the playoffs, they're going to get bounced in the first round, and that's going to make their situation even shittier, because then they're going to be guaranteed not to get their first overall pick or their first round pick, which I'll be getting to a little bit later in this video. So really, no matter what happens, even by some miracle of God, they somehow make the play-in game, they get hot, they make it past the play-in game, they're going to get bounced in the first round, and they really kind of made it worse on themselves. So hopefully that does not happen if you're a Philadelphia 76ers fan. But I regress, and not even move on to just highlight once again the reality of their situation. They also have Paul George, who at 34 years old is looking like a 34-year-old, and that is very not good for them, because if he's already on the downward slope of his career and you're paying the guy for the next 3 years $50 million, he's not only not going to be the second superstar you thought you were getting with Embiid, he's only going to be getting worse, and you're going to continue to pay him a shit ton of money. And actually, with how his contract is structured, you pay him a little bit more every single year. So when I say around $50 million, it's going to be over $50 million for the next 3 years. So that is definitely not ideal for them in any way. And then lastly, Joel Embiid, their superstar on their team, has only played 19 games this season. His injury issues are cropping back up in a gigantic way, and with him being 30 years old now, I don't think he's going to regress as a player talent-wise yet. He is definitely getting towards the end of his career more than he's getting towards the beginning of his career, and as he gets older, his injury issues probably aren't going to get any better, so things are not looking great for the 76ers, and they're definitely at quite an all-time low. So given the situation they currently find themselves in, which is not a great one, it naturally leads to the question, what now? Like, where can they go from here? And you can take this in two ways. There's good news, and then there's bad news. There's good things about their situation, and then there's bad things about their situation. And let's give them the good news first, because I feel like this video has been kind of down, kind of negative. So let's go with the good news. The good news is that Tyrese Maxey is on your team for at least the next 5 seasons, and he is looking like he's going to be a potential superstar guard for them for a very long time, and is looking like he's probably the future of their team, and is going to be a great player for a very long time. Another great thing is that they had a very good draft cycle last year, as they were able to add a stud in Jared McCain, who, when he was healthy, looked like a beast and potential to be the rookie of the year until he went down with his injury. They also got a very good role player in Justin Edwards, who I thought was crazy that he didn't even get drafted. I think he went undrafted, but I thought it was crazy. And if they did draft him, it was very late. I forget which one, so I'm sorry if I messed that up. But either way, I thought it was crazy he fell as far as he did, and I think they got a great player in him, and he has been very productive for them this year in a very much expanded role that they probably didn't expect to put him in yet. And then even Adam Bona has had stints as well, and he's looked decent in the G League, so maybe he will also be a good player. So overall, getting 3 very solid players in the draft cycle is always very nice. So at worst, they probably have 3 role players going into the future, and that is always great to have anytime you can have a good draft cycle like that. Also, I'd say the Quentin Grimes trade is a W for them. They got rid of Caleb Martin, who really wasn't doing much, and they got Quentin Grimes, who I think is the better player. He's younger, and he's also cheaper, and I think he's going to be a very solid player for them. So I think they got a very solid guy for at least the next few seasons, so that was a good trade on their part. They still do have a chance to get their first-round pick, which would be huge for them, because the only way they get their first-round pick this year is if it lands in the top 6, and that would be huge, because because this 2025 class is absolutely stacked with talent. Now, the odds are they will not be getting a top six pick, but at least there's a chance due to the lottery. So there's at least hope in that aspect. And as of right now, they do still have a 2025 second rounder. So they're going to probably be able to at least make one selection in this draft class, which is at least somewhat of something to have hope for. So at least you can have hope up until the draft lottery. And wherever the lottery gods wants to put your ping pong balls, that's where you're going to stand. And hopefully it's in the top six if you're a Philadelphia 76ers fan. But unfortunately, that's going to be it for the good news. Now it's time for the bad news. Paul George could be on one of the worst contracts in the entire league. I'm not willing to say he's washed up yet, but he looks very bad. At least not nearly what they thought they were getting in him. And that contract is untradeable, okay? You're not going to get anyone to get that contract with how he's playing right now. So you are stuck with him. So your only hope is praying that he becomes the Paul George he was at least last year with the Clippers for his last few years. Like, you need him to become good again, or that contract is going to be a horrendous spot for them for the next 3 seasons, which is not going to be great for them. Joel Embiid has gigantic question marks around him. There's a chance he stays healthy and plays at his MVP level once again. He's a great player when he's healthy. But my God, are these injury issues scary for a 7 footer? He just can't stay healthy, dude. And I mean, if at 30 years old, not being able to stay healthy, people probably won't be as willing to trade for a guy like him. So it's gonna be even hard to get rid of him like that. So you really kind of just have to really hope that he stays healthy. So far, your first two biggest negatives based on hope and praying that they can get back to where they once were, which is never a great spot to be in as an organization. And on top of that, their entire roster is at average the ninth oldest roster in the entire league. So it's not like they have a whole bunch of high ceiling young guys that can bail them out in the future. They don't have many of them. They really have two in Maxey and McCain. Maybe Justin Edwards if you want to argue that. That would even be a stretch. Ricky Council might be a role player. That's about it, okay? Like, they don't have much going for them in the young man department. And that brings me to the last part where there's really no clear path to improvement. What are you going to do to improve this team if Paul George is washed up, if he keeps getting worse every year? What are you going to do if Embiid stays hurt? There's not much you can do. Like I said, not much internal development going to be going on here. Maybe McCain becomes an all-star. That's your best situation. Maxey becomes a superstar. Embiid becomes somewhat healthy. You could potentially have a decent team, but that is a lot of hoping going on. And then on top of that, you can't make many trades. Most of the contracts you have are a whole bunch of veterans that most people won't trade for. They definitely aren't going to give you a star for him, so it's not like you're going to improve that much through trades. No one is trading for Paul George. Probably not that many people are giving you what Embiid's worth at this point, so there's really no reason to trade him. And I don't think they're going to trade Tyrese Maxey because he's kind of the future of their team. And then free agency, they have so much money tied up into their big three, on top of a whole bunch of other veterans, on top of eventually going to have to extend McCain and other guys in the future. It's going to be very hard to pay anybody big bucks in free agency, and it actually will be impossible to add any max or star level players. So that leaves them in a situation where you really have no clear paths of improvement without doing anything drastic. And if you do something drastic, it's probably going to result in a not great situation for the next few years. And you might be restarting the process all over again, which I'm sure no Philly fan wants to hear. Overall, I just think the 76ers are in the middle of a season from hell. I think they have a little bit of hope that hopefully Paul George can get back to where he was. Maybe he was injured this year with all the drama going on with Embiid. Maybe that affected him. And you kind of just hope Paul George can at least be the third option, borderline star level player. Maxey can develop into a superstar. Embiid can stay healthy, and you might have a decent team next year. But my God, that's a lot of ifs, and that's not a good spot to be in. There's a lot of question marks surrounding this team. I think overall, the 76ers might be due for a little bit worse than just one bad season here coming up, and it could get rough for 76ers fans in the future. But unfortunately, guys, that's me for Zero. So come below. Do agree with me. Do you think the 76ers are in for a rough ride? Do you think they can improve? Find your thoughts in the comment section below. What do you think they should do? If you did like, point to the like button and subscribe button. That's a word to me. And I hope you have a blessed day because I had a blessed day. So you need a blessed day. All glory to God. See you in the next video. Goodbye. Boo. Blah.